Well, hello everybody once again. Video today we'll be talking about conclusion. Tomorrow I will have another video. So 5 videos for the week, and that's just finishing up the docs on the Gilded Age. But today we'll talk a little bit about conclusion, complexity, the last points there. On the remind system and on your email, you'll have this kind of sheet here that talks about sourcing. Phrases you can use when you're doing the HAP, when you're doing the historical situation, doing the audience, the purpose and point of view. You might have this sheet out when you're taking a test because you want some words to use to show that there's historical context. This describe during this time, point of the point of view is like the author was meant like being an abolitionist. This is why the author thought that this is why William Lloyd Garrison thought that slavery should be emancipated immediately, like we should get rid of slavery, things of that nature. You'll see. But what I said yesterday too about this, unless you study it, review it, organize it, there's no use of you using this. And maybe because you've already, have your game plan of, like I've always said, use this to go like, oh, Mr. Bryce, I don't need this. Fine with me, whatever tools that you can use in here. So, all right, I think we begin. I think I have enough I'm going to send out a video tomorrow to your parents because I know you love your parents and to have all this information about what's happening for the test next Friday, that you'll get your e-ticket on Wednesday, and they can check up on you, have the best environment possible for you to do your best on this exam. I know you're going to love that. All right, let's, I'll float to the left there. So I think it's my cue to kind of like get on today's Google Slides that I'm going to share. So and I'll minimize myself so you want to just see my big head here. Before we talk about conclusion and complexity, what does good historical context looks like? This prompt from Albert I.O. I'm going to use later for the conclusion. Evaluate the extent in which the Civil War was a turning point in the lives of African Americans in the United States. Bad as Civil War was a bloody event that led to the death of thousands of Americans. That almost sounds like a filler statement. Anytime that's a little bit too general, hopefully you could follow that up with some good historical context. Slavery has existed for hundreds of years in the United States. It was a terrible thing that had to be abolished. Please don't have this kind of commentary in your essay. That sounds a little bit too emotional here. And of course, the very good, and I do believe students can come up with this. Some of you will. Some of you have been working, I told you so hard. They're just trying to either listen to me or look at the slides, practice, and they had questions. Very good. The peculiar institution, I put that in quotes because that's what the South would use for their defense. Slavery had been part of America's identity since the founding of the original English colony at Jamestown. In the early years, compromise was key to avoiding the moral question, kind of like, Missouri Compromise, Three-Fifths Compromise. But as America entered the mid-19th century, sectional tensions and crises with popular sovereignty, Kansas, and fugitive slaves made the issue increasingly unavoidable. Wow, this sounds perfect almost. When the Civil War began, the war was transformed from the one to simply save the Union to a battle for the future of slavery and freedom in the United States. That's a very, very polished historical context in here. So I don't expect you to come up with that, but you understand that you always need some, really explanation in your historical context. And you want to do it around what was happening during the time a little bit before. All right, good. And always, because I think the beginning is going to be key to the whole essay test that you're doing. Always like what a good thesis looks like again. A thesis statement is a sentence in which you state an argument about a topic and then describe briefly how you approve your argument. I told you to put those categories, 2 or 3 categories, or 2 or 3 things that you're going to be part of your argument. This is an argument, but not a thesis. The movie JFK was an inaccurate, there should be one, inaccurate portrayal of President Kennedy. Very simplistic. You say it's a position, it's an argument, it's not good enough for a push. This is a thesis. And I always do the counter first. Despite Oliver Stone using factual events through recreation, dramatization, and real film footage, the movie JFK was an inaccurate portrayal of President Kennedy because of the way it ignores Kennedy's youth, his relationship with his father, and the foundings of the Warren Commission. So, what you get, you don't want some kind of simplistic, maybe you've kind of been used to that, maybe in some of your other papers, or maybe another, English class, maybe early on. But this is definitely what APUSH is looking for, a complex thesis here. So, in that point. Now, because I cannot stand you guys or ladies using in document 1 and document 2 and document 3. Instead of saying a document, you just talk about the documents and then you just cite it later. In his inaugural edition of the Liberated Abolitionist William Lloyd Garrett, in a speech by Abraham Lincoln, he wants to appeal to Board of State, According to the chart, you're not starting with in document 1. I told you, these graders, they know what the question is in the documents. You're putting in their head that you're filling up words and filling up space and time. They want you to get to the point. They have so many essays to read, and they will probably not read your essay word for word. But you'd be surprised if some other people were to grade the essays they graded. They know what they're doing. They know what they're doing because they've seen all these essays. They don't have to do that. Good. Another warning, don't cite documents in groups. Don't say put them together like documents 1, 2, 4, and 7. They may come, let's just say you have maybe a couple of docs that just pretty seamless. One is about Louisiana Purchase. The other one is about Jefferson purchasing, what his thinking was to attain the territory. They might a little bit come together, but try to parse them out as best you can in your body, all right? So just remember that for sure. Good enough, all right? Sourcing documents, for at least 2 documents, you have to source, and I put that on your attachment there. Easiest to do is explain the historical context of a document, because what was going on when Lincoln made his Gettysburg Address? Well, they just fought the battle in July of that year, and they were going to, it's a commemoration at the cemetery in November. And that's why Lincoln is there for this, to make a speech about this kind of dedication to this cemetery and all the, and again, that's the largest death total in a battle in 3 days, like that, of the battle. Antietam was the largest single day battle of casualties. So I think that's the easy. Hardest, I think, is the audience, because why is this audience is you can't just say that the audience for Lincoln were the people there, that were attending the ceremony. That's not the audience. That doesn't get you a point. You have to explain why that audience is there. It's this dedication, this war dead, and they, and again, this is a pivotal time during the Civil War because it's a turning point after the Gettysburg defeat of the, General Lee and his forces. That's what you have to put down in your essay. And I'm, shaking my hands because you just want to say, well, the audience is just the American public. The audience, you have to elaborate. You have to explain, the significance of the audience. What is the significance? All the time, if you're writing some things down here, what is that extra sentence to explain why is the audience important? Why is this, why are people feeling uneasy at this time, after the Civil War? So you really, really have, I'm always worried about when you just think the audience is just like, the public and you get a point. Lincoln was speaking to the American people at the debate with Stephen Douglas. That's bad. That's terrible. But so many students, most students will do something like that. Lincoln was trying to get elected to the Senate, and he was appealing to the people of Illinois of his motivation to keep the country together, even if the United States is half slave and half free. That's audience point. I know you say, well, Mr. Bryce, I'm trying to tell you what's going to get you your points and what's going to get you passing and get you college credit. So I mean, you can have the teenage ears and not listen to me. So, good point of view. Since this pamphlet was distributed by the Sons of Liberty, likely exaggerated British policies of power in order to promote their cause. That's good point of view. It's not try to stay away from the point of view of let's just say here, of George McClellan, is biased because he's trying to defeat Lincoln in 1864. Don't stay away from bias. Say reason why George McClellan, because he had been, he is replaced, as head of the, Army of the Northern Potomac, and he feels a little bit resentful, and a lot of his supporters feel like that he can win this election against Lincoln, and possibly, not him, McClellan himself, just to get detail, was not really the peace candidate, but possibly that, it would, bring a quick end to the Civil War. Jefferson's argument against the bank's constitutionality was at least partially rooted in his opposition to central banking and any government involvement in the economy. All good points of view. I'm not going to read over all of them, but I hope that you will take a look at this. Some phrasing for purpose. There's nothing like words like trying to convince, shock. I think the main one problem, let me do this real quick. Let me replace shock with persuade and convince. Those are kind of really the action words that I would use if I'm trying to get that point. Those are, ones that in there, on there. Inform, motivate, incite. These are good words if you want to do that. And again, if you have the attachment that I'm sending out on the email and a remind, you may want to add these words if those words are not in there. Edit, come up with your own sheet. I can't wait to see some of these study notes that students are coming up with, because some of these notes I will use for next year's class for sure when we're on the DBQ part of the essays, or just even the long essay question. Next year they're probably going to have to do 2 essays again. You guys get it easy. In a way, situation is bad of what we're in, so it's not like, you're in an easy situation. I don't want to discount that. About 8-push essays. I don't know why eloquent, it seemed like they think it's misspelled. Just some general things again here. 8-push essays are not eloquent or sophisticated writing, or even very interesting writing. It's not riveting, as you notice with your textbook. You have to remind yourself of that, who maybe there's a few of you who really appreciate writing and good writing. You get obsessive over your grammar. You get obsessive over your, being very polished and good looking, and that, you've got those good English, grammar skills that you want to abide by. But it's not, and it's not, some of you are good creative writers too. You're almost like amateur novelist already, that you know how to create a story, plot, crescendo, like the denouement at the end and all that kind of good stuff that you learn in English. This is not that type of writing or essay writing. It's okay to use contractions sometimes. Don't try to, use them all the time. In your sense for a preposition, so that's okay. That's not going to put the most bitter taste in the grader's mouth. Start your sentence with but. I do that in my essays and showing examples. Yes, go ahead and, cast me into the pit of fire or burn me up for doing that, English teachers. Writing is very didactic. It's textbook. I've said that. It's more professorial teaching. pretty banal, really, if you want to reflect that. The nonfiction books that I read are interesting because I'm interested in the history, but for the average reader, novels are much, much more interesting, which they use facts. It's a made up story, but they use facts of what was going on in history, you know. So much, much more interesting than what historians do in their nonfiction. It's more about showing you know how to think like an historian. They want to see you display, compare, and contrast, and change over time. Say these ad infinitum, ad nauseum. That's what you're supposed to show. You're looking at these documents and you know how to incorporate them to support an argument. That's what historians are supposed to do. And that's what this course is about. Okay. Conclusion and complexity. Coming towards the end of your essay here. Because tomorrow I'm only just going to be talking about the docs from the Gilded Age. So, I always love my little, visual here, what your whole essay should look like, starting very general, getting to the specifics of the bodies, and then you want to spread back out to the base, kind of be a little bit more general to come up with your conclusion. It ties the entire essay together, as you know. It reviews the problems, thesis statement, and the major arguments. You separate with a paragraph, okay? Your conclusion statement, but maybe only 2 or 3 sentences because of time. I've seen essays get perfect scores, out of 7, and they didn't really have a conclusion. They had maybe 1 sentence, or there's not really a conclusion there. So it's not really absolutely necessary. It's nice because, I've said this on the third one, maybe a recovery or sharpening of your rough thesis. It really makes the grader kind of say, you know what, I wasn't too happy with this student's thesis, but now I kind of understand it more because it's fleshed out more, the conclusion, and I like the way they, brought everything together. So don't just discount the conclusion. It may be able to help you recover with your average thesis statement that you may have, It answers so what by explaining broad significance. Don't introduce new evidence like your body. And in addition to, another point that I forgot to make, hopefully you don't say a sentence like I forgot to make, but you can compare and contrast, use some change, some continuity out of the time range in the prompt during this time. So you can even go into periods, 8 and 9, like into the 1950s, if you're comparing like the 20s to the Gilded Age and all the way up to the 50s, and the kind of political policies that were very similar, and the economic policies in those time periods. So it's okay. So remember that. All right. Very good. Now, the next thing that's up here is kind of funny because you're not going to do this, and I'll probably put up the horror of it. I don't know which is worse to use in an essay. Starting out your essay with "in this essay," or ending your essay in the last paragraph with "in conclusion." I don't even know that. I think this is even corrected in the first grade. I would imagine, I guess you can excuse them because they're just beginning to write, but let's say by the end of elementary school, this is pretty egregious, pretty much of an abomination to put in your essay these phrases. It's almost blood curdling. Just sends shivers up my spine that any high school student, college student, or an adult trying to write an essay would look at this as almost signs of, functional illiteracy. So that's, and I know most of you are appalled by just looking at those phrases too as well. All right. Anyway. So let's come up with a conclusion here. Evaluate, and this is one from the first slide. Evaluate the extent in which the Civil War was a turning point in the lives of African Americans in the United States. I wrote this morning, typed this morning. You're not going to, you can cut and paste any of this and go to Google or do anything. I don't, all my stuff is original when I'm showing you examples that I'm typing up here all this week. I enjoy writing essays. Yes, I enjoy writing push essays. I know, I'm sick like that. And I just came with this morning, so it's going to be maybe a little rough. I'll make some corrections here, but I like doing that because I'm in the boat with you guys and girls, that we can just, it shows you that like it's not a pristine, perfect, let's put this in the Hall of Fame of conclusions here. It's not. So, and they're just but looking at some of the things. I already see the proverbial. I got some spelling mistakes down there, I see. The United States Civil War resulted in major consequences for the country. It emancipated slaves, it preserved the country of Union and Confederate states, and placed the federal government supreme position of the states. Notice the theme of today is the Civil War and Reconstruction. Notice how I try to apply all my examples as we go along here, if you care. But it also left the country in a state of recovery in the next several years, particularly in the former Confederate states. Most were devastated through loss of lives and major damages to their infrastructure systems in there. Not every state received really the destructions of their railroad, transportation, communication systems, but many of the states were in the Deep South. But you can, states like Arkansas and Texas, not as much of the damages like a South Carolina, like a Tennessee, or Mississippi, or Alabama. All right? Nevertheless, all these states had to deal with transforming from a slave-based economy to a free labor economic system. The problem was the biggest challenge and the major challenge for the newly emancipated freedmen and women. The almost 4 million newly freed slaves, I should put on here. By the way, you notice that I still have some specific factual information that I'm using here. That's why the content that you'll be studying today and this weekend is so important. I think content will make you the best essay writer and mostly prepared, because you'll be able to, hey, I understand, this, labor unions change over time, and I'll be able to share my knowledge that I've learned with the greater. The almost 4 million newly freed slaves would have to bear the brunt of Southern scapegoating, revenge, and exploitation of their labor. I'm alluding to the sharecropping, crop lien system, and tenant farming as they were dealing with these transitions. African Americans would face black codes. I don't need a comma there. Jim Crow laws, limited job opportunities and freedom in the next 100 years in the South. I think what's so great about this year that you guys get to type this up is that it's easier to make corrections than if you're handwriting this, for sure. I know that's like, duh, Mr. Price, but I mean, it's just, that's going to be a major advantage. The proverbial light at the end of the tunnel, and again, this is an extensive conclusion, maybe we will not have the time, was a march for equal opportunity and civil rights, was the passage of the 14th, 15th Amendments, civil rights legislation, from 1866, 1875. We know what happened to those civil rights. In education, both African Americans and non-African Americans will work persistently to achieve what they felt was deserved and written in the Constitution and set out in the ideals of the Declaration of Independence. All right, let me put a comma here. And I kind of paraphrased this. I did not use the direct, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I said that all men were created equal and born with the natural rights of life, freedom, and the pursuit of happiness in a secure, fair environment. I should say fair. And fair environment. So there happens in a secure and fair environment. There you go. There you have your conclusion. I don't spend a lot of time on that. Try to restate your thesis in a way and maybe sharpen it up a little bit. Don't offer too much. Don't try to redo your body like that in there, with evidence. And again, I looked ahead here towards Reconstruction, a little bit the after effects you want to put in there. Good. All right, complex understanding. The reason why is unicorn. People, graders, teachers, especially me, we don't like perfection. We don't like 100s. We don't want this year you get 10 points, and graders would not want to give you 10th point. They want to reserve that for I put on here the 1% that really shows higher level thinking in history. Don't waste your time thinking like, well, let me check my essay for complex understanding. Let it become naturally. Because if your essay is, has good reasoning, good thesis, good historical context, good sourcing, good integration of documents, you will get that point. I very rarely that students get this point that's in the past, and I don't think it should be. That's why it's saying that, it's rare as a unicorn, almost non-existent, really, right, about unicorn, about achieving this point. So that's why, all the APUSH people that you see online and all the sites, they don't really put the biggest emphasis on here. If anything, that maybe what they'll see, the reason why they award you this point, because you're able to link each document, maybe relate and transition better with them. A major theme like that, or you talk about a major themes. Left out the letters here. A major theme or themes that's all over your essay, and you're able to really conclude in a way that's just magnificent, and the graders go, oh, and and it goes into the kind of like their kind of Hall of Fame. If they were able to grade this together, they're probably going to be grading individually online and passing on to somebody else to let another grader take a look at it online. But usually when they used to get together, in these enclaves in different states, and they would again show some of the essays that they're shining stars and deserve this perfect score. I say enough said about this. Place more emphasis on your start than the ending. I said that's going to really make or break you probably, is your historical context and the thesis statement in a way. And if you say it every day that I will do these videos and meet with you on Zoom next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and I will actually set up a schedule for you tomorrow. You'll see more about that when I will be on Zoom, and kind of invite you guys if you want to join me. That I will always be talking about what your thesis should look like and what your first paragraph should look like in historical context, until it almost becomes like breathing. Did I address the prompt? Did I address all the parts of the prompt? Did I make an argument/position? In my first paragraph, do I start off with what was happening during the time or a little bit before that would lead up to my thesis? I'm going to be saying that every day, Good. Bam. All right, let's see here. Now, before we get started, probably a couple of documents that should have been talked about yesterday was these two common ones. It's this about the Fugitive Slave Act that was passed in 1850, that Northerners in Boston and Massachusetts right here are warning free slaves. Can be confusing if you don't really understand the context, that this is after the Fugitive Slave Law was passed, and they're warning about free blacks being just captured or kidnapped and brought back to the South and enslaved again. It's kind of like 4 years as a slave. That's the basis of the movie right there. Very, very common there. And again, links that you can look at. And the kind of not to make fun of the moment, like Bleeding Sumner here with Preston Brooks and his revenge for talking about his uncle. And I think a lot of the students before did not understand the point of view of the cartoonist. And this is where your observation skills come in, or you just really leave the document alone. That's one you're not going to use because you don't really understand it. It shows Sumner being a very, very sympathetic. This is not a good dramatization of what happened. Sumner's kind of stuck behind some desk here as Preston Brooks is beating him till his cane breaks. Sumner in this kind of really brave stance, standing up against this bully, this Southern almost hillbilly hick, and the cartoonist's point of view. And you see that he has, Kansas in his hand there, talking about that, what was happening. Kansas, Nebraska in 1854, kind of the events in 1856 is Bleeding Kansas. So you get 2-for-1. You're talking about bleeding Kansas, bleeding Sumner in that way. So and some of you will say, "Oh, Mr. Price, I've seen this before." Yeah, you've seen it before, but you don't understand it. You don't know these like you think you know them. I mean, you should really question yourself. How much do you really know about these common documents? Dots, periods, 5, get Lincoln, emancipation, and I'll go through these just kind of, sort of just listing them out here, as I do want to meet that kind of 35-minute mark here. Lincoln's, the big one, the big enchilada during this time, of course, is the Gettysburg Address. And dare I say, I think more important than the Declaration of Independence. Because he's really trying to say that the Civil War is not over. He says, we are now fighting for a noble cause. Again, I know Lincoln. He's not a Thaddeus Stevens. He's not a Charles Sumner. He's not a Wendell Phillips. He's not an abolitionist. But he's being very idealistic for sure. And I think with the brevity of the Gettysburg Address, it sounds like he means it. He sounds like that he really wants everybody, like one nation, everybody. So it's just, again, I was listening to an explanation that I sent on the line here from Khan Academy. And she was like, she was saying like, it's just so emotionally gets to me even right now as I'm teaching it. And it's so true. So just kind of like, plug for like, appreciating the Gettysburg Address. Lincoln's second inaugural address, it kind of seems like everybody wants to use this as his kind of, with malice toward them, no resentment or anger that he's trying to bring, the South back into the Union, pretty much in his 10% plan, more of a forgiving plan in a way. And of course, his argument is that they never even left the Union anyway, so it's time to, heal the wounds of the nation for this point. So that's more representative. You get Reconstruction cartoons, and by one of our most used cartoonists on the 8-Push, if you see him, is Thomas Nast. Not only Boss Tweed cartoons, but Reconstruction cartoons. And he's pretty favorable to African Americans. Ulysses S. Grant, yes, he's very anti-Catholic, very anti-immigrant. But seems to be, not seems to be, but he really depicts African Americans in the kind of, you'll see here the Klan in the South being these bullies, intimidators, being very aggressive towards, freedmen. So it's a very, very good cartoon. So not only Thomas Nast is known for Boss Tweed, and then don't forget too, also, I guess in a way too, is, coming up with the, Republican elephant and kind of solidifying the Democrats' donkey as being the mascots of parties. You see these Reconstruction cartoons, these, again, the Catholic guy, like you see Horace Greeley and all these people here that just, stepping on them. Of course, you've seen this cartoon since probably the first grade about with Reconstruction, with the KKK and the White Leg. And I tell you, there's all these red shirt knights of Camellia, always kind of like, holding African Americans down, persecuting them at this time. Please look those up, please. And the typical Boss Tweed, you should feel pretty giddy and happy, if you see Boss Tweed cartoons on here. You should know them. You should be familiar. Start corruption, greed, political machines, and about there is Thomas Nast and how it brought Tweed down because his constituent, it's attributed that he said that they can, see the pictures, that they understand the picture. We're still a visual society today, so it's not nothing that's very new in here. The scandals of Grant, you say, well, Nast really liked Grant. Yeah, he did. Usually didn't depict Grant as someone who was the leader in these whiskey Belknap schemes. Credit Mobier, like in here. This is not all Thomas Nast, but I'm saying when he did, draw him, he's usually seen as someone that's kind of the victim too as well. So, and that's part of, Grant's, presidency. And like I said, he's one of my favorite presidents because he was not directly involved in that. And I thought he did, try to do the best by protecting African American rights for the most part. So, I mean, again, there's a lot of incidents that happened that he definitely could have did a lot more. The 14th Amendment, equal protection of the law. This is the one that's going to be why we get a Brown, favorable decision. I know that may not be directly on your test, but you can allude to the later on that what Korematsu in World War II, his lawyers were defending him on the basis of the 14th Amendment, that you have equal protection under the law. No states can deprive you of that. I know nobody cares about the 14th Amendment. They just don't, and you don't understand it. It's kryptonite. Freedmen's Bureau, maybe get the picture. That's a very common picture about what just one is a cartoon from Oliver O. Howard, Howard University is named after him. Plus, he chased Chief Joseph out into Canada till he surrendered. Ugh. But anyway, this is kind of trying to keep the peace between Southern factions who just see this like, what are we going to do now? Like, again, we don't like this Union occupation. We don't like now African Americans are free now. Now, are they going to be equal status to, us white Southerners? What about our jobs, our livelihood? Now we have to compete against them. So look up the site there about the cartoon. This last one was on the 2017 one, was the strong government versus weak government. And there's a site that explains that about what Grant was doing. I know it looks like the same people. You probably wouldn't not even recognize Grant. A lot of people missed his interpretation of this cartoon. And you see Rutherford B. Hayes, that Grant is pretty strong-handed. Rutherford B. Hayes is not. Compromise of 1877, troops withdrawn from the South. And there's more of an explanation here about actually what is said on some of the items that are down here. It's a good review for, Reconstruction right here about the evolution from going from Grant, who's president from 1869 to 1877, to Rutherford B. Hayes, which is the end of Reconstruction. Very good. I just, again, so excited with the students that are hanging with me. They're keeping up. They're not waiting until next Thursday, next Friday morning, or probably not even going to study at all. That's a very, 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 very few, but we'll probably be one or two of one of those, which is sad and disappointing. But I love to see the students, come online. That's like looking at this. Today, I'm actually, sending this out. Students asking questions, good questions at that, or they want some clarification from me. It's just so motivating and inspiring. And this is why I teach history. This is why I'm a teacher, because the feedback from the students. I want you to learn. I want you to do your best. I want you to have some success. And that I want you to just carry on, and nothing can stop you. You're going to I always say that you go beyond me. You're going to go beyond me. You're going to move further than me, and than what I do. Like I say again, as far as with learning in your college careers, your post-college careers as well. It's just a beautiful thing to imagine, So I know it's already getting close to 40 minutes, but gotta really thank you note that one of our former STEM students got into grad school and architecture school and design in North Carolina State. Man, it just smiles over my face. She thanked me for the recommendation letter, and by no means that's why she got in the States, because of my recommendation letter. By no means. Matter of fact, I don't know. That might have been a minus on her part, but she did it on her own, and it's just so happy to see you guys just grow and just have success and keep on striving and moving on. Sorry for going on, and sorry for my old person gabbing moment. You guys take care. I'll be talking to you tomorrow.